Why do good people suffer? It sounds like a simple question, but it is one of the most dangerous questions a human being can ask. Because it does not rise from curiosity alone. It rises from funerals, hospital rooms, broken homes, silent prayers, and moments when reality feels too cruel to fit inside any comforting belief. We can accept that evil people may destroy themselves. We can accept consequences, failure, even justice. But innocent suffering feels different. It feels like a crack in the structure of the world itself. A child gets sick. A faithful person buries someone they love. A kind soul lives gently and still gets crushed by circumstances they never chose. And when that happens, something inside us resists every easy answer. Because if goodness offers no protection from suffering, then what exactly are we trusting when we trust the moral shape of the universe? The world keeps giving us examples no one wants to explain. A child in a hospital bed, a mother praying beside someone she cannot save, a man who lived honestly losing everything in a disaster he never caused, a person who spent years helping others left alone in the moment they needed help most. These scenes do not feel like moral lessons. They feel like accusations. Because suffering becomes hardest to understand when it lands on people who seem least deserving of it. Human beings can understand punishment even when it hurts. What we cannot easily accept is randomness wrapped in pain. We do not only ask why suffering exists, we ask why it keeps choosing the wrong people. And when no answer comes, the silence itself starts to feel theological, as if reality is saying something terrible about justice, or about God, or about both. For centuries, religion and philosophy have returned to this same wound because it touches something deeper than doctrine. If God is good, if God is powerful, if God sees everything, then why are the innocent not spared? This is not exactly the same as the question of evil in general. It is sharper, more intimate. Because now the problem is not only that suffering exists, but that it seems to ignore moral fairness. The kind are not protected. The honest are not exempt. The pure do not walk around pain as if virtue were a shield. Some thinkers say suffering is part of a fallen world. Others say it is bound to freedom, chance, mortality, or a reality too complex for human judgment. But the heart hears all of that and still asks the same thing. Why does goodness so often fail to keep people safe? Heaven enters without denying the pain. She does not offer a cheap explanation, because cheap explanations become offensive when suffering is real. Instead, she suggests that goodness does not function like a magical contract with the universe. Being good does not place a person outside mortality, chance, or the consequences of living in a broken world shared with other people and their choices. The rain falls on the cruel and the kind. Illness does not pause to check moral worth. Tragedy is not always a targeted sentence. Sometimes it is the cost of being human in a world where fragility touches everyone. Her voice is calm, but not cold. She is not saying suffering is fair. She is saying goodness may not protect us from pain, because goodness was never promised as protection. It may be something else entirely, a way of moving through suffering without becoming cruel in return. Hell is ready for that answer. She tilts her head and asks the question that makes the entire room colder. If goodness cannot protect the good, then what exactly is it worth? Why be honest in a world that still breaks honest people? Why stay kind in a reality that rewards cruelty so often and so publicly? Why trust a moral order that lets innocence bleed while indifference survives? Her argument is not childish. It is brutal because it follows the logic of disappointment to its end. If the good suffer just like everyone else, then morality can start to look less like truth and more like beauty without power. Something admirable, perhaps, but not something the universe actually honors. And once that suspicion enters the mind, it changes everything. Not only how we see suffering, but how we see virtue itself. Some people answer with the language of growth. They say suffering deepens character, reveals hidden strength, purifies love, teaches compassion, humbles pride, and strips away illusions. There is truth in that idea, and heaven does not reject it. Some pain does change people. Some losses wake the soul. Some wounds make a person gentler, wiser, more capable of seeing the suffering of others. But hell interrupts before the answer can become comforting. "Fine," she says. Then tell that to the child. Tell it to the person crushed so early and so deeply that no lesson could justify the cost. Tell it to the grieving parent, the abused soul, the life ended before any growth could be named. The moment suffering is explained too neatly, it starts sounding less like wisdom and more like emotional distance. Because while some suffering transforms, some suffering simply destroys. And any honest script has to admit that. Then the question shifts again. What if suffering is not always about punishment and not always about growth, but about exposure? Exposure of what is fragile, what is temporary, what can be lost, what can be loved, and what a human being truly is when comfort disappears. Good people suffer, and when they do, they reveal something terrible and beautiful at the same time. Some collapse, some harden, some become bitter. Some remain kind in the middle of pain that should have made them cruel. That is why innocent suffering is so disturbing. Not only because it seems unfair, but because it reveals that goodness is real precisely when it cannot buy safety. A good person who remains human in suffering is not proving that pain is meaningful. They may be proving something far more difficult, that goodness has value even when it is not rewarded. And that may be either the most hopeful truth in the world or the most tragic. And this is where the real tension appears. Maybe the question is not only why good people suffer, maybe it is why suffering does not always destroy their goodness. That is the strange part. Pain often exposes the soul more clearly than comfort ever could. A cruel person in pain becomes more cruel. A shallow person becomes desperate. But sometimes, against all logic, a wounded person becomes more compassionate, not less. More gentle, not less. More honest, not less. Heaven sees that as a sign that goodness is deeper than circumstance. Hell sees it differently. She calls it beautiful, but tragic, like a candle refusing to go out in a storm that never should have existed. And once those two views collide, the viewer is trapped between them. Is suffering revealing grace, or merely forcing goodness to prove itself in a world that does not deserve it? So perhaps the most uncomfortable answer is this: good people suffer because goodness does not place anyone outside the conditions of being human. Fragility, mortality, other people's choices, accidents, disease, injustice, time, all of these still touch the good. But that is not the end of the question. The deeper question is what suffering reveals once it arrives. If pain can reach everyone, then goodness is no longer validated by protection. It is validated by response, by whether a person keeps loving without guarantee, keeps telling the truth without reward, keeps choosing mercy without evidence that mercy will be returned. That is the payoff no one wants, because it gives no simple bargain. It does not say, "Be good and you will be safe." It says something much harder. Maybe goodness matters most exactly where safety disappears. Maybe the real mystery is not why suffering reaches the good. Maybe the real mystery is why some people remain good after suffering reaches them. That does not solve the pain. It does not erase injustice. It does not make grief beautiful, but it changes the center of the story. The question stops being only about what God allows and starts becoming about what a soul becomes when it is wounded. Perhaps goodness was never proof that life would be gentle. Perhaps it was proof that even in a fractured world, something inside the human being can still face darkness without fully becoming it. And if that is true, then suffering does not only test faith, it tests love, truth, and the depth of what we call good. Maybe that is why this question never dies. Because it does not ask only what kind of world we live in, it asks what kind of people we will become inside it. See you in the next video, where the questions only get darker.